I have studied a lot of literatures and I've watched many videos. I will at this point summarize what we need to do as melanin dominant human to liberate ourselves from the ugly situation that has befallen us as African Bantu people. Before I proceed, I'd like to ask, how did ancient African people, Bantu Muntu, get conquered or colonized? If African Bantus or Muntu were so great, how did we lost our empires? I am Bantu Ebi Udoibiono, Chief Executive Officer, Marifado. At Marifado, we are scholars, mystery teachers, scribes, speakers of undiluted truth without reserving words. We are messengers to melanin dominant human race and the preservers of ancient Kemetic indigenous cultural heritage. Send us an email, join our research team, study with us, send books, papers, journals, and all necessary tips that will help melanin dominant race to compete at the assemblies of nations. Email join@marifado.com, www.marifado.com. Take our words to heart, but if it sounds offensive, write it at the corner of your house, because your children and those yet unborn will need it tomorrow. This is a short presentation which I'm going to use what I call the gate theory to explain. The reason for gate is because it can be opened and closed. Gate is the doorway to exit and entrance. I will explain 4 ways that ancient Africans, Bantus, were defeated and conquered at the point we are in this modern day. This lecture is for educational purposes and is made with the intent of sparking healthy dialogue and research. As always, I challenge you to do your own research and engage us in a healthy debate or constructive criticism. We all know that empires around the globe rise and fall. In the past, many vulnerable gates were opened, and our ancestors never took notice of it. And this brought about the collapse of our ancient civilization. It is my opinion that if I open our eyes to these gates, we can develop a blueprint model for the correction of Africa's error that has brought us into this low standard of representation and identity. Therefore, our first gate theory is number 1, Africa's diversity. Africans are the most genetically diverse people on the planet. Over 5,000 languages spoken all over the planet. Believe it or not, the first prejudice and ethnicity crisis, racial superiority, began in Africa. Their inability to establish a pan-global and universal identity to protect their walls. Gate number 2, natural resources. We will agree that Africans has all the natural resources she needs and those she doesn't have need for. When you have so much, you become the envied of many. The good, the bad, the ugly, the rich, and the poor. Africa became distinguished in the world for her legendary wealth. This made the white Arab to say, against the camels manched, use tar, and against poverty, make a trip to Sudan. Get number 3, the certification of North Africa. History has it that there were a sudden climate change in the northern region of Africa, a region which is known today as Egypt, which gradually changed the region to desert. And this ushered a mass migration of African people in and out of Kemet, Northern Africa. The Africans we see in Nigeria, West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa were the builders of great civilization in Kemet, what is now known as Egypt, Middle East, and the Dravidian, stretching down to India. All of these were African empires. The Europeans systematically cut it off using the Suez Canal as advantage. This period made it easy for foreigners to troop in numbers to Africa in search for food. Africa was once the food basket of all races. There were many people and culture which we are still yet to uncover their evidence. It has been buried in the sand due to destruction, invasion, and intrusion of African land. Herodotus, the father of Greek history, is quoted to have referenced a Bantu tribe known as the Gadamantes as the brilliant farmers, resourceful engineers, and enterprising merchants who produced remarkable tools of civilization. Losing elements of our culture, history, and civilization is the greatest woe that can happen to any race. This is the reason why invaders will always destroy your home upon gaining access to your sacred resources. Last but not the least, get number 4, human error, African error, and religion. The African people are so spiritual in nature. He or she believes that every human he or she comes in contact with have a spiritual part and is accountable to his karmic debts. Africa needs to awaken to the knowledge that other races with melanin recessive gene are not bound by karmic debts. So they must be banished or expelled when trespassed or encroached on African land, property, and resources. The African man is so concerned about moral uprightness, so spiritually conscious, and materially, technologically, and industrially ignorance. The African people and their descendants are a ninefold soul. They are the only original creature that belongs to the earth and owns the earth, and are endowed with pigment called melanin and carbon. For more information about melanin and carbon, watch the debate below. Racial superiority between Dr. Francis Wilson and William Shoxley, 1974. In order to expunge more on Bantu errors and religion, I will discuss 3 ancient examples of our past kings. Error number 1, and religion. Oba Ewuare of Benin is considered as one of the greatest kings in Benin by many. He is quoted to have predicted that the invaders will visit the kingdom of Benin and destroy it. 500 years later, his prophecy was fulfilled, and the Great Wall of Benin was destroyed by the British in 1897, and he was exiled to Calabar. Now, what was his human hero? He was quoted saying, "Never make a stranger suffer, and whatever else you may do to a foreigner, you must not kill him or send him away from you. Forgive his transgressions, because he does not know the law by which you live. Give him time and teach him the laws of your land." Unfortunately, every other races who came to Africa were conscious of the resources of Africa they wanted to exploit. To buttress more on this, the Benin Empire of present-day Nigeria lies in ruin. According to estimates by new scientist Fred Pace, Benin Empire War were at one point 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China and consume 100 times more material than the Great Pyramid of Cheops. Barely any trace of these walls exists today. The city was also one of the first cities to have a resemblance of street lighting. Mathematicians and other scholars, Ron English, author of African Fractals, when examining the pattern underpinned architecture, arts and designs of the Benin walls, noted that the city and its surrounding villages were purposely laid out to form perfect fractals, with similar shapes repeated in the rooms of each house, and the house itself with cluster of houses in the village, its mathematical predictable pattern. Life in Benin at that time consisted of large crowds going through even larger streets with people colorfully dressed, some in white, others in yellow, blue, and green. For further details, read the website below. Another example of Africa's error and religion can be cited when King Paye of Kush, 728 BCE. King Paye of Kush invaded Egypt in about 728 BCE and dethroned all foreigners who had taken administrative positions in Lower Kemet and reached as far north as Heliopolis, but then withdrew without establishing a permanent control. One would have thought that he was going to kill all the foreign administrators, but he did the exact opposite. He forgave them and gave them possession to occupy within the kingdom, but warned them never to encroach on the sacred wisdom of ancient Kemetic people. All the ancient African kings I have read about exhibited the highest moral character than any other race on earth. They will always forgive the people that destroy the very fabric of their identity. Feel free to criticize me if I am wrong. For more information, check on the website below. Lastly, I'll talk about another prominent king, King Mvambe Nzinga of Congo. Our last one is King Mvambe Nzinga of Congo. He was more concerned with spirituality and moral uprightness than national security, development, and industrialization. He converted to Christianity and was a genuine believer. It is reported that he was very enthusiastic about his newfound faith. This excited the Portuguese because they have found a viable king they can clearly manipulate using religion. Ironically, King Mvambe Nzinga was more spiritually gifted than the very people that converted him. He became completely disheartened and confused by the behavior of the Portuguese and began to write many letters to King Manuel of Portugal. These letters are great resources for examination, for us to understand the mind of a true African spiritual person. I read, each day the traders are kidnapping our people, children of this country, sons of our nobles and vassals, even people of our own family. This corruption and depravity are so widespread that our land is entirely depopulated. We need in this kingdom only priests and school teachers and no merchandise, unless it is wine and flour and flour for masses. It is our wish that this kingdom not be a place for trade or transport of slaves. King Mvambe Nzinga wrote many letters, but I'm only going to read 2 letters and also read one of the replies that King Manuel of Portugal replied to King Mvambe Nzinga of Congo. I read the second letter. In this kingdom, faith is as fragile as glass because of the bad examples of the men who came to teach here. Because the lust of the world and the lure of wealth have turned them away from the truth. Just as the Jews crucified the Son of God because of covetousness, my brother, so today he's again crucified. King Mvambe Nzinga of Congo. Here is the reply that King Manuel of Portugal replied. You tell me that you want no slave trading in your domains, because this trade is depopulating your country. The Portuguese there, on the contrary, tell me how vast the Congo is and how it is so thickly populated that it seems as if no slave has ever left. In conclusion, from the above illustration, we can see how we were systematically dispossessed of our thrones and empires. The Bantu minds have been raped, abused, miseducated, indoctrinated, and trained to become killers and destroyers of self without knowing. A perfect healing of the Bantu people would require that through history of culture, traditions, ways of life, ethics, norms of our society, an environment be taught from childhood to adulthood. In teaching through history, people need logic application in evaluating the information. High degree of interest, passion, commitment to invent and create value for the society. This high degree of interest is greatly affected by religion, Western education, Eastern education, and politics. We shouldn't blame Western or the Eastern people who have continuously exploited us. Rather, we should look or ask ourselves, what is it we are not doing that is giving them advantage to exploit us? And what must we do that will bridge the gap between us and them, that they won't rape our land anymore? We are lost in ignorance, karmic depth, laws, history, poetry, and false prophecies. I am submitting to us that to change our ugly narrative, we should look inward in our spirituality, history, and past civilization, starting with ourselves, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and our ancient ancestors. In doing this, we will be able to trace the taboos our ancient ancestors before us committed and correct them. There is no Eurocentric solution to Africa's problem. According to African educator Dr. John Henry Clark, he teaches us that to be self-sufficient, people have to see the Creator when they look in the mirror. If not, they will never have a healthy self-concept. He reminds us that anything that changes our own concept of God, you are no longer a free man or a woman. Let me digress to the Christian Bible. Micah 4 verse 5. All people walk according to their God. So what is the God of Africa? Thank you for listening. Subscribe to our channel. Watch out for part 2. Africa's backwardness and changing our ugly narratives. Send us your questions, criticism, and more at join@marifado.com, on our website www.marifado.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Siabonga, Tatenda, Asiero, Tukumpong.